All right. Well, I guess I'm ready. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you got? What is all this in front of me here now? Oh, you got those taglines you talked about. Is that what this is?
Yeah, you're supposed to be saying the podcast intro right now.
Okay. Well, I can do that. I didn't know. You want me to read this right now?
It's supposed to come after.
Okay, so you got this. Good morning, at least for us, and welcome to Conversation Transfer. Did you hear me put the little radio voice in
Yes,
there?
I heard you.
Is that cool?
Sure. Why not?
Okay. Should I do it again?
Well, we're not going to be able to overlay music on this one, so music is out.
You got music too?
I was going to, but now we're not because you didn't read the intro correctly.
Oh, well, just
We'll have to do it next time. Next
next
episode.
podcast?
Yeah.
You want me to just start over and then you can overlay music? You can just like overlay it in the beginning or whatever?
Well, you said you had an idea for music anyway, so might as well.
Well, I want to hear what you got.
But that's all this was. So if you have that idea, we can just do it with music next time.
Okay, then here, take two. Good morning. At least, why am I saying at least for us? I mean, I don't like that.
Oh, it's supposed to be funny.
Because it should be, and who knows, it might not be morning when people are listening to it. How about just good day?
Sure.
Good day, mate. There, I threw a little accent in there.
No. Racist.
All right. How about hello?
Hello.
Hello. I'm going to cross out and good morning.
Ouch. Editing hurts.
It does. You did a good job on this. This is pretty cool. Okay, so I say my thing, and then you're going to say this thing after. Is that how it goes?
I believe so.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Hello, and welcome to Conversation Transfer. Oh, okay.
Wow. Standing.
Well, if you're going to add music, I sure hope it's a lot.
Well, you know what? This one's not going to have music. This has been our intro. You know what? Let's cut to the beginning. Here we go. We're Conversation Transfer.
Yep, Conversation Transfer. That's a name.
Yep. That's the name we came up with.
I'm Patrick. That's my son.
Yep. I'm Hayden. I'm 16 and he's 52, so age difference.
So a little generation thing going on here, but should be good.
Yeah. Next podcast, we'll hopefully have the scripted intro.
We'll have an intro, huh? Okay, yeah, with music.
So, on that music note, I have created a basic rhythm, bass, and a melody line which has not been recorded yet.
Okay.
For our intro. If you'd like to look, I've written out the melody line, which I'll play on sax. Here it is.
Oh, cool. Of course,
just
people can't see this, but he just handed me a sheet of music.
Yes. And
nice.
I created that on...
Is that a...
Yes, that's a fall. It's like that high note. You know, time passages.
Huh?
The sax, the time passages, the song.
Time passages, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
When the sax comes in on that solo.
Oh, man, you're making me think hard.
With the super, super high note. That's what that high note is right there.
Oh, wow.
Like, that's basically a screen.
Well, when do we get to hear this?
Next podcast.
Next podcast. I gotta wait a week.
I'll have to record it this weekend.
Okay.
I do my other band stuff or something.
All right. So you're gonna have music. You're gonna have a little tag, and this must be the outro tag here. This one.
Yes, we'll do that at the end though.
Okay. Don't say that now. Keep it a surprise.
Yes.
Okay.
So we've got that music. And our name, Conversation Transfer.
Conversation Transfer.
Okay feedback, and we like it, so
yeah,
let's keep it, right?
Well, I guess we can keep that.
Yeah.
If it's that was the whole thing. It was make sure nobody else had it, right?
Yes.
And nobody does.
Yes.
So have we patented it or trademarked it yet? So that
No. But of course, nobody can hear what Conversation Transfer is because we haven't even uploaded yet. So
okay,
unless some person somewhere randomly does that within the next 5 weeks, month, whatever it'll be until we start uploading these.
Why is it going to take so long? Why don't we get that going?
Because you want to have time at the beginning, like have some. If you go on vacation during a weekend or something, can't record, you still have content for the next week.
Oh,
you want to get ahead before you even start publishing these.
Okay.
So yeah, speaking of which, I believe I found a hosting website. It should be pulled up on your computer.
Okay.
It's called Spreaker. It seems free. It's the only one I've found so far that seems free without some catch, like first 90 days free or anything.
Right.
However, I don't know like what the free version is yet, because like if it'll restrict the time limit and that type of stuff, which hopefully it doesn't.
So this is a host?
Yes, this is a hosting website where you'll create an RSS feed and all that type of stuff to upload your podcast to this host. This is where the MP3 file is stored. And then when you go outsource to Apple Podcasts, they'll just access this file instead of downloading it themselves when playing it to listeners.
Okay, so it can get out on iTunes or whatever?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Because this is the place where the RSS feed is created. Like, the RSS stands for Really Simple Syndicate. It makes it so Apple Podcast doesn't have to download your full MP3 file, saving storage, and it makes it so listeners can subscribe to you and be notified basically every time a new upload happens to your host and you submit it to Apple iTunes, the podcast place.
Okay.
So, yeah, I believe that's all the review from our last episode was all about how we're going to do this, because we're still new. And there's some updates I have on that process.
Okay.
Do you want to get into today's topic?
Sure. Ready to go.
So, last week I had a history project that was due. It was called a multi-genre project. Basically, where you either cite or projects like posters, pictures, blah, 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 that other people have made or from a specific time period, or you create your own genres. We had to have 5, and this was supposed to be over an event in American history, 1865 to today, because it's the second half of a history course, I should say. So what I chose as a topic was the American middle class, and in this paper, we're supposed to describe the cultural significance to it, to Americans, and I thought this was really interesting, so I'd like to talk to you about, kind of in a timeline-based topic stream, about this progression, and then like what it looks like today, and then our thoughts and opinions, kind of have like this discussion based off of this historical context.
So what, the timeline of the middle class, or the timeline, or what did you say?
The timeline, like how it emerged in America, this modern sense of middle class.
Yeah, because there wasn't a middle class for a long time.
No, yes. It was either...
they're
super wealthy, or you were poor.
You were digging a ditch, or you were drinking whiskey. That's what it was.
Well, you're drinking whiskey.
Well, that's true either way, so...
Yeah. But yeah, I'd just like to explain how we got to having a middle class, and then what's happening with that today.
Okay, you're going to be able to put up with my thoughts, because
yes.
I'm 52.
Yes, so that's a good mention point. Like, I'm, as a new generation, I'm just being experienced to this stuff, like job-wise and stuff, the workforce.
Well, yeah.
And you're 52, you've been in it for 30 years? How many years?
Yeah, a long time.
Something like that, a long time. So you've experienced these types of things, and you've actually lived some of these events that we'll be talking about.
Exactly. Okay, so what have you learned?
Well,
when did the middle class get going? What was that about?
I'd like to start with the Progressive Era and Booming 20s. This is when there was no middle class.
Oh, right. And
right?
See, yeah, I'm not going to remember my schooling too much. I mean, I know a little bit about the 20s,
yes.
But not a whole lot.
Yes.
I mean, really, the history for me is going to begin probably the 60s.
60s. Well, we'll be getting to that point.
Okay.
Because that is a very influential period for this topic, too.
Okay, but it's history, so let's not make it boring.
We're not going to make it boring.
Right.
I'd just like to build up this timeline so we can discuss about it today.
Okay.
So, the Progressive Era and the Booming 20s. The Progressive Era was a period of 1890 to 1900. You may know of this era because of the slums and stuff. You're either poor or you're rich. People lived in what was called a slum, like a big city, but they were tenant houses where it was super skinny, and there's lots of people jam-cracked into these little boxes. It was dirty, disgusting. In fact, if you'd like to see pictures of slums, you can look at your screen real fast.
Yep.
I'm gonna pull up what I'm describing, and
Right.
you can describe what you're saying to the audience.
While you're pulling it up, can you think of anything today that's in modern times that's very similar?
Ghettos.
Yep.
Ghettos. That's the biggest.
How about in other countries?
Uh,
The one that comes to mind is there's a class system in India, so still you have an ultra poor population and an ultra wealthy population, and those slums are just as you see in these pictures from the early 1900s here. People stacked on top of each other, living in shanty towns, and that the thing that's amazing is this was the United States.
yeah, this is the cities, by the way.
Right.
These are cities. 'Cause
Right.
This is before people had moved out of the cities.
Yeah.
We think of cities today as like the workplace.
Right.
We go there to work, right?
Right.
But back then, they lived and worked here. Because
Right.
it was very industrialized.
Sure.
This is also during the Industrial Revolution. So that's basically how your American cities exploded.
And
They
that's
originated from something like this.
the late 1800s through 1920, you say? So it's through World War One.
It's up to World War One, yeah, basically.
Okay, so when was that?
Through World War One, and
When did the United States get into World War One? 1910, 1911?
American involvement was 1917, I believe.
Okay, so late.
Let me just fact check that real fast. It was 1917, April 6th, 1917.
Okay, so we got involved in 1917. When did World War One start in Europe?
I believe it was 1914. Let me look.
Yep. Sorry for making you do all that.
No, that's fine.
I figured as a kid closer to high school, you'd have that stuff memorized.
Well, yes, it's 1914.
Okay.
July 28th. And like we said, we were only in the war for about a year, a little over a year, because it ended November 11th, 1918.
Okay.
So we were barely in that war.
Yeah, and we had that Spanish flu thing going on then.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the slums didn't help that.
No, yeah, that helped the spread. But that's
Okay.
a different topic. Like I said, I'm just trying to go over this. You just need this historical context.
Right, I'm sorry.
So that World War I hit, and we hit what was called the booming 20s
At the end of World War One.
at the end of World War I.
Okay.
Even though we were involved with it for like just a year.
Okay.
But there was all this rallying beforehand, like, we need to go to war, we need to go to war. And people were leaving the U.S. and like, I'm going to join the French army, I'm going to join the British army. We need to help these people, are what we considered allies, or because these immigrants felt very nationalistic still to their home country.
Sure. Yep.
So we ended up joining the war, but it was very little period of time.
Okay.
It was not during the biggest parts of it.
Right. Just sort of mopped it up, I guess.
Yes.
Okay.
So that led to the booming 20s, which you got to understand, we're still not to this middle class yet. But that's where the economy boomed for a period of 9 years
For the rich people.
for everyone.
Oh.
Wages rose, rich people got rich, and the problem with this was that it was all built on credit. They got this idea of, hey, we could just loan people credit, without having, to the point that there was no real money to back that credit. So the money didn't exist.
Well, that sounds like 2008.
Yeah, which is one of the topics in here.
Okay.
You'll see trends to that. And so what happened was in 1929, the stock market collapsed. Wall Street just kablooey overnight, quite literally.
And that first crash of the stock market, what was the reason for that?
This false credit.
The false credit. So did creditors then go to cash in and nobody had money, or what?
Yes, basically. All these businesses were using these banks' credit, and when the banks basically come in and say, hey, your money's due, and then these businesses were like, well, we don't have your money. There is no money. We didn't, make it. And then the banks go back and check their revenue, like what they have in their what they have for numbers, and more money was credited out to people than what they had.
Even the banks.
Even the banks. So basically, money did not exist.
Well, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, but that's what caused this crash.
So, and the Great Depression was worldwide.
Yes, it started in America though.
Okay.
Because the American economy crashed, these other countries that were depending on, that we were trading with in the Industrial Revolution, we were giving all these industry, we were the big industrial giants, they no longer had trade between the two because we had a crisis. We kind of shut it all down.
Okay.
So that in turn led to them going, oh, we had credit on those things too, and their economies crashed. And some examples is, I believe, France and other places in Europe, like the UK, they suffered from this as well.
Okay.
So this Wall Street crash happens.
29, so that's just about a decade.
Yes. And this Wall Street crash happens, and a good thing to know about this is the Wall Street crash is not the only factor that caused the Great Depression. It's a terrible blow to investors, right? But what about the common working Joe that
Yeah, what about the common guy?
that doesn't,
He's not investing in anything.
Yeah.
He's sending his kids to sweatshops to make enough money to feed the family.
Yes, exactly. Well, when the stock market crashed for these businesses,
There was no way they could get paid.
there was no way those people could get paid. Then you're talking layoffs, you're talking job losses, you're talking...
Oh, it's kind of, familiar today.
Yeah.
Yes, good job. That's why I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
But yeah, so, and then the banks wouldn't, lend these businesses any more money, so the businesses couldn't pay their workers, and the businesses had to get rid of the workers so they could have that money to pay their loans. And then businesses would shut down. And then the banks started failing. Banks literally went bankrupt
Sure.
and shut down.
Yep. That was one of the big things about 2008 and bailing out the banks, is the fear was if those banks failed again, there would be no place for anyone to go to get money.
Yeah, and it's cool to talk about that because you have a very vivid reminder of this because 2008 was only 12 years ago.
Yes. Yep.
So.
Oh, it's very vivid.
Yes.
We got lucky through that.
Well, the Great Depression.
We, as in our family.
Yes, we did.
Anyways.
But the Great Depression went from a period of 1929, where that Wall Street crashed, to 1939.
10 years, Jesus.
10 years, yes, where there was no work, and there was also a drought in between, which a lot of farmers suffered from this. Mm-hmm. Farmers were already suffering because the 20s didn't help them. And then it was like another crash to them. So farmers always have had like this downside to these crashes.
You're talking about the Dust Bowl.
Yes.
And that was over farming the Midwest.
Yes. And that came around the same time this economic crash had. It's like coincidence, but it like double hit us.
Yep.
Right? So FDR helped with this this crisis with his policies he was placing.
I'm curious, do you know when, because they wanted to plant more in order to make more, higher yields, more money, obviously. Mm-hmm. When did that actually start? Because the Dust Bowl, it wasn't just an overnight thing, it was a few years. What was the height? Do you know the height of the drought in the Midwest? What year?
I believe it was... mid-30s sometime. Actually, no. This is saying the dirty 30s started in 1930 and lasted about a decade, but the massive dust storms began in 31.
Okay, so almost simultaneously. It was just a few years, a couple years.
A couple years, and then...
And then we lived through the entire decade of a drought.
Yes. And FDR tried to help this with his policies, his fireside chats,
right.
Which was like this first time a president had come on to the radio and talked to Americans, kind of like a podcast, like what we're doing right now, like going, this is what the policies I'm putting in place, this is why I'm doing it, this is how I'm trying to help that unemployment rate, which you got to understand, the unemployment rate was like 25%. It was very high.
Yeah, yep.
Which he did pull it down for a while to like 15%, but then it'd go back up, and then he'd pull it down again.
No, the majority, when you say that, that's the majority. You say 25%.
25% are unemployed.
Right.
Yes.
But what does that count? What age group? Because
that counts everybody. That counts from 1929, where the economy's booming, throughout the 30s. So we compare the number of people working in 1929.
What's the age group?
I don't know. I believe it's it was something like 15 to 50.
Yeah, because like one thing about that time period that I remember is that there were children, basically. Well, farmers, they always did it. Your kids were old enough to carry a plow. They were out working. Yes. But in the cities, in the industrialized parts of the United States, when children, and we're talking children that are school-age children that were old enough to, say, move a rock from this side of the room to the other side of the room, they had a job that they had to go to and do.
Yep.
So
that was FDR banned that. He made that illegal.
Yeah, okay.
So, and that's been illegal from now on.
As it should be.
Other than farmers. He made the exception, which is still today, because farmhands, it's a little different industry.
Yep.
But, so that all happened, and he did help, FDR. He did do a lot of great things, but then came World War II.
Well, before you get past the Depression era, I had a question about corruption and what, if any, kind of government, either federal, state, or municipal corruption was happening at the time. Was greed, the power? Was it, the almighty dollar? What was the morality of the country at that time?
The morality... Which time? The Great Depression?
Right. Just following let's say the Dirty 30s.
Dirty 30s?
29 to 39.
The morality was very low. The typical American, very depressed. That's why it's called depression. Very depressed. Depressed is the morality.
So it was do whatever it took to survive.
Exactly. It was all about survival then. It's not about money. It's not about a place to live. It's about basically survival because you don't have any of those things. You're just trying to find where your next meal comes from.
So you're talking a Game of Thrones type situation.
Oh, kind of, yes. It's very, very
that severe. Existed in real life in the United States.
Yes.
For the most part. I mean, not literally dragons and competing tribes, but as far as the individual went, he was out to feed himself and, anybody that he happened to love.
Yes.
Okay, that's just...
I'm going to pull up a picture. This is a very famous photo.
Uh-huh.
This one right here.
Yep.
I believe this is from a magazine called The Migrant Mother.
Uh-huh.
This was a picture taken during the Great Depression. This was the front cover of a magazine during this time. This is in the western parts where the Dust Bowl's happening. And these farmers had to migrate everywhere to get work.
So this photograph shows a woman and her two children.
Yes.
And by our standards today, we would look at them and say, oh, those poor people, she's very gaunt. I mean, the children, their faces are turned. You really can't see if they're well fed or not, but her clothes are dirty. She's rough, obviously rough. But here's the thing. To her and the people around her, that was probably just normal. Yes.
And this is what flooded the media during this time. Depression. That's why it's called the Great Depression. Do you see how she kind of looks depressed? This is one of the most famous photos.
Well, she's not smiling.
Yeah. No,
I mean,
it's one of the famous photos that are used to portray this time period.
When I think of an opposing photograph, I'm picturing some woman doing the Charleston with a big old smile on her face and their fat cheeks and big hips. So to contrast that image with this one, yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. But like I said earlier, going into World War II, this is what pulled us out of the Great Depression. And here is where our middle class comes in. This is where
the middle class begins.
This is where our modern middle class comes in.
Right.
All these men go to war.
Yep.
They come back. The war's not important for this episode. I mean, it's very important to American history, but it's not
for this. It just happened.
Topic. Yep. It just happened. All you need to know is a bunch of guys left, fought, and came back.
Right.
And that helped the economy. That boosted our economy again. When they came back...
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I know you didn't want to talk about the war. So the United States is in this grip of the Great Depression.
Yes.
World War II comes around. Where the hell did we get the money to start building tanks and planes and jeeps? And
we didn't have money. They just basically went to Ford and said, "You're building tanks."
But how did the economy work? Where was that?
That money came after the war. They're like, "We're giving you money." They didn't get any money for all those time periods where they're building the tanks. They're basically saying, "You have a duty to do for your country. You're going to do it."
So the raw materials. What? There was no supply or distribution?
There was supply, because Ford had kind of shut down because of this Great Depression.
Right.
Nobody was buying automobiles.
Right.
Nobody even had the luxury to eat most of the time.
Right. Yeah, I got you.
So they had a bunch of this scrap material left around from these cars that were being mass produced. I mean, mass produced. Tons.
So the materials were there.
The materials were there. They said, "Make us tanks out of those materials."
Okay.
Tanks, airplanes.
Okay.
Lincoln and Ford Company did all this, which Ford owned Lincoln.
Okay. So then once that started moving, a resource gathering infrastructure built itself.
Yes. And then the money came afterwards from winning the war.
How? Just explain briefly to this idiot how
when
money just appeared, or...
I'm not sure on it myself, but I believe this is how it worked. Something like pouring all this money into a war. You conquer your enemies.
But it wasn't money. It was resources.
It was resources.
Okay.
Which is money in the end, because you have to pay for all those resources after the war.
Okay.
Then when you conquer your enemies, there's taxes you oppose for being... you're a bad boy. You're going to give me all this money. So basically when we conquered Germany... when we made that agreement with Russia, we purged their economy and used it to fuel ours.
So, kind of stole resources from them.
In a way, yes.
Or,
but
you want to call it tax, but
yeah,
I can see exactly what you're saying.
After World War
we
II,
put all this energy into defending your ass, now you're going to give us a little something in return.
And then the enemies we conquered, like Germany...
Yep.
They suffered a Great Depression because they owed us all this money now.
Gotcha.
So we were getting the money from...
Well, I thought we had to prop up Germany. I mean, wasn't that part of the what was it, the airlifts and all that? We had to drop food. Or no, I guess that was because of Berlin being split in two.
Yes, that was after.
I'm sorry. We weren't talking about the war, so sorry.
History's fun.
I hope it's not a boring podcast.
Yeah.
Actually, the fact that when you think about what we're talking about and then compare it to our lives today, this is kind of a very interesting thing to talk about.
And it's kind of scary, too.
Well, only because you're familiar with those idiots that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it.
Yep.
And here we are kind of talking about stuff that's happened 50 years ago. But, I mean... we're in it's a totally different thing with this COVID-19, but it's still sort of, what if? What if something like a drought happens on top of this? What if something,
then your food supply,
the earthquakes start happening, the comets fall from the sky, another giant, the volcanoes explode.
So coincidental. It's not.
Think about it, though. I know, but the planet has a funny way.
This one was caused by humans.
COVID-19 was kind of caused by nature, but that's still kind of up in the air.
Yeah.
Anyways, not to get off topic, but
it's just
it's very interesting. Yes, that there was a.
You need to know your history. History class has always been boring. Yes, it's a very boring class, but if you understand at least the basics, you can think forward and think for yourself. Read between the lines. Blah blah blah.
Yes.
Look.
Foreseeable. Therefore preventable.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. It's almost like your own future looking glass,
Yes.
That's
kind of a smart freaking thing to do.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So
World War II ended.
People come back.
They're here.
They're here. These people have gone, oh, that Great Depression sucked, right? They're thinking about it like we're thinking about the Great Recession today. That kind of sucked. We don't want that to happen again, right? So what they do is they form what's called the middle, otherwise known as the middle class. When these people come back to work...
Who are they? Who forms the middle?
These are mostly white majorities at this time. As in white people.
So just... Are they soldiers?
Yes.
Okay.
These are soldiers that come back. They come back to, you know, a country that's economically booming. And instead of repeating what happened in the 1920s...
Instead of returning home to their slums, now they got a little...
Now they're like, you know what? F this. We're going to move outside the city. So masses of white migration, people just start moving out of the city into what's called a suburb.
The suburbs.
Yes, which is what we live
in the high school
today.
halls.
Yes.
In the shopping mall.
Anyway, the suburb. Oh, excuse me. The suburbs are what the middle class is built off of. It's this idea of getting out of this poor slum and moving to the suburbs. That's the 1940s, just a movement. You're moving. There's no wealth distribution, massive wealth distribution. By the 1950s, this idea of wealth distribution came to become what was known as the middle. In 1951, this is I used this for my project. C. Wright Mills coined the term middle class, or the modern term middle class, what we think of it as today. In his book, White Collar, The American Middle Class, he explained what we had explained before, what happened in the Progressive Era, the booming 20s, and he even goes back into the 1800s, explaining what farmers were like, what poor people were like, what wealthy people were like, etc., etc. Now, we think of, 1951, that was a long time ago, but at this period, he's going to a long time ago for him, right? So, with this migration of white majorities into these suburbs by the returning soldiers, a white-collar class is created. You've heard the terms blue-collar, white-collar.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, more focused on office jobs than industrializing. And this did hurt the manufacturing and industrial industries, but later on in history, they'll be fine. Like, we have our industry today. They moved to outsourcing, which did hurt the people that stayed with industry, though. So that's later in the 90s and 2000s. But during this time period, this white-collar class is created. These people go to office jobs. They're getting standard pay. They all have about the same income per year. They have the same social ideology.
Does any of this have to do with the war on poverty? Because didn't that come out in the late 30s?
That was a whole Great Depression movement, I think.
Right.
Get rid of this poverty, help us.
But you mentioned that the war, that people came back from the war, and I mean, I can't assume that they had money in their pocket for just coming back from the war. There had to, wasn't there a program? Wasn't that the New Deal?
The war on poverty is 1964.
Oh, so okay.
That's with Lyndon B. Johnson.
Well, that's interesting.
That's during the social movement.
So that's later than this.
Yes, because that's during that's actually a part we'll be getting to.
Okay.
All you need to know for the 1950s, suburbs, white majorities migrating into these suburbs, same social ideologies, and income. Okay. Which in turn distributed the wealth. So now you have this
What do you mean? You confused me there.
So it distributed the wealth to where you don't have poor, rich, you now have a middle. Because this middle, it wasn't the bare minimum wages that the poor people were getting, but it's not the super big bucks that the rich people are getting. It's somewhere in between.
Where did the idea of there being an in-between come from when there was none before?
The president and the people. This migration, they basically, with all this migration of people, the presidents had to respect that and respond to that, and so did workforces. Though they were unhappy to do this because they're like, oh, no more cheap labor.
Well, let me just guess.
Yes.
Let me just guess, because I want to guess, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, just to answer my own question. Was it a matter of The idea is, I don't want to live in the slums. I just fought this horrible war. I'm going to move away, and I'm going to have a better standard of living for myself.
That was the first idea. The second idea was, hey, it's a bandwagon. Everybody's doing it.
Okay.
That was the original idea. We need to get out. And then all these people are like, oh, where's Billy Bob going? Oh, he's going to the brand new suburb across the way, out of the slum.
So did they demand higher wages out of the employers?
Basically, because these houses they were buying, more expensive. So in turn, the banks had to give better loans. And then because people were moving out of the cities, the cities kind of transformed
the
into
workforce
the workplace.
was leaving, yes.
Yeah. The industrial workforce was leaving. And these people, would buy an automobile and drive to the city for work their 9-to-5 shift, and come back. So that the cities kind of became this idea of, oh, it's not a place to live and do all this industry. Now it's a place to come to, sit in an office, and promote these industrial ideas instead of build them and come back, because we now had machines to build them for us.
Okay.
So that's where the 1950s came. Now, the 1960s and 1970s, this is where your war on poverty comes in, and all the social movements.
War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again. Am I throwing you there, bud?
A little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
That's Hendrix.
So now we have levee towns, which is what these suburbs came into, and they've been around for a decade.
What? Okay, I didn't go
Here,
back.
I'll
a
show you.
levee town.
A levee town. I'll show you.
So you had suburbs, subdivisions in high school halls, and then you had levee towns. What? And the levee town
towns
grew out
are
of a suburb?
No, they are the suburbs.
Oh, okay,
If
sorry.
you look at these photos,
Yeah, that's a suburb.
yeah,
Yep.
it's the rows of houses next to each
Yep.
other. It's kind of like cookie cutter houses today.
Yeah, sure. No, it's the same. Suburbs are still suburbs.
Yeah,
Yep.
even if you have customizable houses, they're still in rows. They're along a street. They've got some pretty funky designs. Like, that's what it'd look like today. Mm-hmm. Where you live.
Yep.
So the idea of a levee town came, and this was a popular idea. Hey, all these white people moved to the levee towns. What about all the rest of us, right? So that's what the social movements were built on, which did start in the 1950s when this migration was happening, but the biggest periods of time that they're recognized for is the 1960s and 1970s. So there's civil rights, women's liberation, this war on poverty, etc., that are demanding, there needs to be laws where there's not a white side of town and a black side of town, because the white side was all this fancy suburbs, and the black side was still the ghettos and slums. So now we have laws passed for legalization for these people to be moving into these suburbs. Hey, it's not illegal to do so. You can by law. And we have all these social movements, which was very hard time period, but a lot was done. And this social movement idea of all these people migrating even more into the suburbs grew that middle even more, because now the typical American household for all people was the idea of living in a suburb.
The American dream.
Yeah, American dream. Either
The American
going to
dream.
Your small business,
Yep.
going to your business to work in the office.
Yep.
Or
Having more than just that poor lady we saw in the photos.
yes.
Yep.
So now that's perfect place for this time period. The American dream came about this time period. That idea, which the Americanist dream has kind of changed today, but that's another topic.
Well, it's spread. That's the thing, too. Is the American dream spread not only from the industrial areas of this country, from the poor people of this country, it's gone around the world. That idea of coming and owning your little piece of land and going to work and raising your family in a safe, healthy way, that idea has gone around the world now. So we've expanded the American dream worldwide.
Yes.
Safe to mention.
Yes. So we've got the American dream.
Yep. We've got the middle class.
We've got the middle class.
There it is. Here comes the 80s.
1970s hit.
Oh, it's the 70s.
But not because of any power. This is just because of the crashes during the 1970s.
Okay.
Do you remember, you lived this time period?
Yep.
Maybe you were young, but do you remember the oil crisis?
Yes.
Yes. That caused an economic crash, and when economic crashes happen in history, the middle class shrinks.
Okay.
There's still like 64% of Americans are middle class at 71.
So here in the 50s and 60s, the majority of the country were the middle class.
Yes.
Yep.
And in the 70s, the censuses, the American censuses,
Yep.
started counting what was considered the middle class. They hadn't counted it before.
In 1970, because you do it in the...
1970, yes.
Yep.
And in 71, when these numbers came out, we figured there's 64% people in the middle class. After this, it's shrunk ever since. In the 70s, it shrunk because of this economic downfall, oil crisis.
How long did that last? That didn't seem to... I think I
lasted
remember
through
the
the
gas
entire
lines. I remember there
70s.
being no gas.
71.
I remember
through
odd and
79.
even days. So you're telling me that went on for 10 years?
That went on for 10
As a
years.
kid,
Yes.
I remember the waiting and the troubles, and I remember... parents struggling, maybe, but not so much because I was a kid, and kids are oblivious to that crap.
Yes. But it lasted 10 years.
No way.
Yes, because we had very bad diplomatic relationships with
I remember Jimmy
those
Carter.
Arabian
Yeah.
countries. They increased the oil prices 500%.
Yep.
They decreased their giving oil to us 5% each year. So they give us 100% one year, 95% the other year, 5% of 95% the next. It was just, the supply and demand was exploding, which caused an economic crash because a lot of American households, companies are all fueled off of this idea of oil. We need it, to have our electricity, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yeah, that's what...
So prices went up. Economic
Yeah,
crash.
inflation.
And more people, this is
Interest rates.
Yes. This isn't a time period where the wealthy percent is increased. This is a time period where the poor people are increased, the lower percentage. The middle is shrunk, and those numbers are going towards poor people.
Not going up?
They're not going up towards
So you don't
the
have people peeling off the middle class going to the top and people going to the bottom? Everyone was headed south?
Everyone was headed towards the bottom.
Oh, terrific.
The 1980s hit.
There we go.
Here is where you get political.
Holiday.
President Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
Trickle-down economics.
Oh, geez.
The trickle-down, for anybody that doesn't know, trickle-down economics is the idea of cutting taxes for everyone.
Kind of like communism. Looks great on paper, but
looks great
doesn't
on
work in
paper.
real life.
You cut your taxes for everyone,
Yep.
and then you cut your taxes even more for the wealthy top 20%.
Yep.
That's about... That number's not correct, but that's about what we're looking at. So this idea is, hey, if we cut taxes for everyone, yay, the economy's doing better, which it did. It flourished through the 1980s. It's the biggest spikes you've ever seen. It kind of looked like, since 2008 to now, that bull market, it looked like that.
Better than Clinton's 90s?
Yes.
I thought Clinton reigned under the largest economic growth the country had ever
He
seen.
did, but you got to understand we were coming out of a slum from the 70s.
I see.
So we have this 80s boom. Reagan creates this with this idea of trickle-down economics.
And finish your thought on that. Sorry. Trickle-down economics.
Yeah.
So then you've got more tax cuts to even richer people. The thought is that then they would spend their money. And it would trickle down.
It would trickle down. They'd spend their money by, into their corporations, investing, which would in turn create more jobs, in turn make wages rise for people, and make it so there's more jobs and cut the unemployment.
No, just that they would go buy things. They would be consumers.
They would be consumers and invest, creating more jobs, creating higher wages, blah, blah, blah.
But it never happened.
This didn't happen.
Because there's a thing in the human spirit, unfortunately, called greed.
And, yes, because instead of investing and buying...
They hoarded.
They basically hoarded.
Yep.
How we know this? We don't know this by numbers. Well, we do know this by numbers. We don't know this by fact. What we know is during the 1980s when this was promised, yes, taxes were cut. Yes, the Americans didn't have to pay as much towards their government. However, there was no wage increases. There was very little wage increases, and there was very little unemployment movement. There was very little, people coming into new jobs. Yet, there's it was good for Americans for the tax cut, yet the rich people just got richer.
Yep.
And this is the second
And so
thing.
did the people that had jobs. I mean,
Yeah.
wealth did expand a little bit for the middle class, but there was no it didn't expand the middle class for those that were
shrunk
already
the middle class.
Okay.
Because these people that were, on the line between being middle and being poverty,
Right.
it didn't help them.
No.
So they kind of fell into poverty. Well, this is where you see a movement, not all towards poverty, not all towards wealthy. The people that were between the line of middle and being wealthy fell towards the wealthy side because they had those tax cuts. Right? So it kind of goes like this. You have this bar, and it goes like that. And it shrinks to a little percentage from the top going into wealthy, and a little more percentage, in fact, than top going to the wealthy, going to poverty.
Right. So if this is where you see the middle class shrinking, and some of them are headed up.
Yes. At this time, the middle class, the 1980 census, 59% from the 61 and 70, which was from the oil. From 59% to 56%, a whole 3%, another 3% drop, and from 1980 to 1990. That was during that trickle-down economics period.
Yep.
1990, a crash happens at the beginning. Bush comes to being elected, the first Bush, and a crash happens.
It's just a hand in the bush, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, and another little crash happens, and we suffer a little bit economy-wise. The middle class shrinks a little more, but then it's quickly recovered in, Clinton's time during the 90s. Then the second Bush comes around, right? We're having, this is to the 2000s. We're getting really modern here. The middle class from 1990, after that trickle-down economics, to 2001, decreased to 54%. So only 2% drop this time because we did okay. You got to understand, though, the idea of trickle down, the system of it was kind of, pushed aside. The ideology was still around, and the system was still working. Even
That's
though
the problem, because just like communism in flipping Russia and the Soviet Union, great idea on paper, easy to get behind, looks like it's going to help out everybody. This trickle-down economics BS that came about almost destroyed the economy of the country.
Yes.
It was a great idea. I mean, when you explain it to someone, it sounds great. The problem is, in reality, it does not work. Communism does not work in reality because who's going to be the people that run it? Trickle-down economics, people don't choose to do the right thing. Unless there's some kind of disaster, then they do. The old saying, humans are at their best when things are at their absolute worst. Well, the 80s was not a bad time. So people are going to hoard. They're just, okay.
Yeah. And more investments are going to happen. You're going to see your growth swell.
Yeah, on the wrong side of the bell curve.
It's not this isn't for the common Joe, right?
Well, the other thing that happened, too, was the idea of, and I don't know when this came about, this might have been the end of the Reagan era or the beginning of the Bush era, the government decided to get their money from the middle class, because you said it was 52%, 53% of the population?
It was which time period? Which census?
The Haiti census.
The Haiti census, which would come in 1990, was 56%.
So, majority of people are middle class, so then the government goes, that's who we're going to go to get our money from.
Yep.
Because that's the majority of people. That's where the majority of our country's wealth is in the middle class. Yes, collectively, that's where the majority of money was. But individually, that's not who had the spending power. Those people didn't have the spending power.
No,
the rich did.
They were just, their money was coming. It was coming in. They were using it to buy food and pay their mortgages.
Yes. There was no spending power. There wasn't any discretionary income. There
was spending power. Like, people were, a little more lenient to buy things. They weren't strict as, after the 2008, people stopped buying things like that they didn't need.
I'm sorry. You got a guy that makes $200,000 a year, and you got a guy that makes $20,000 a year. Okay. Yes. Now, the cost of a loaf of bread is the same for both guys. Yes. Only the percentage of the person who makes $20,000 income is more used on that loaf of bread than the percentage of the guy that makes $200,000.
Yes.
Explain that as a good thing.
That's not a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Which the middle class wasn't.
So who said this is a great idea? Let's go get our money from the middle class.
I believe that was during the first Bush's era.
How do people see that simple math as the way to do it? I don't think you should be penalized for going out and making money. When you work hard and you make your $200,000 a year, I mean, maybe you're putting more time into your job than this other guy. But when it comes to the actual spending power, you need to be taxed a little more.
Yeah. There needs to be a set system, basically. There needs to be, this guy makes this much, we're going to tax him, instead of the 52%, 54%.
I don't care if the majority of wealth is coming out of the middle, quote, unquote, class.
Yeah.
Their spending power is not as much as...
the majority come out by lowering that rate still, because there's more people there. If you lower the rate, right, you lower the taxes.
Rate of what?
The rate of taxes.
Okay.
You describe taxes.
Yes.
Because they upped them for the middle class.
Yes.
If you lower that tax rate, you're still getting more money from that middle class than you are anywhere else because there's more people there.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So you're still getting that income base. Mm-hmm. And then you can also get the same, if not more, money out of the rich people because not only do they have more money, but they have a little more lenience to give that money away. And
they do as individuals, and that's the part of the equation that's left out. You've got 10 people that make $20,000 a year. It's $200,000, right?
Yes.
And then you got one person over here making $200,000 a year. Loaf of bread's $2. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All these individuals, if you tax them at 3%, you're going to take 3% of their $20,000. In total, $200,000. So that works. But if you take 3% from this guy, the $200,000 guy,
yep,
you're going to get 3% of $200,000. And it's not going to affect his ability to buy that $2 loaf of bread as much as the 3% of the $20,000 does.
Which you're talking that $200,000 and $20,000.
I'm talking about $200,000 just got two different ways.
Yes.
I'm talking about taxing at the same 3%.
Yeah.
It hurts the guy. It hurts this group. It takes 10 people to make the $200,000 over here. It takes the one person over here, right?
Yeah.
So this group.
Yes.
What you're calling the middle class.
Yes. Which it's not $20,000, which I was going to explain.
No, I'm just using that as an example.
Using a number.
Just an number as an example.
Don't think that $20,000 is middle class.
No,
if you're making $20,000.
You're impoverished. Yes, yeah. I know. This is this is just an example. The 3% that comes out of each of these 10 guys, and the 3% that comes out of this one guy. This 3% is a larger amount of their ability to spend money than it is this person over here.
That's why if you lower your 10 people with $20,000 and raise this, you're coming about at the same percentage of money flowing out of both of those people.
But what happened was this person, this single person, now is taxed only 1%.
The $200,000.
And these people are still taxed. Oh, let's tax them a little more. Let's make it 4%.
Because there's more.
Because there's more of them. But that doesn't. Those
don't work.
It does not work.
No.
It doesn't. It doesn't even work when you do the math. If I put tick marks on paper and drew this out on paper, I don't know why it trickle down. Economics is based on a person doing a good thing. And you cannot legislate what people are going to do.
Greed.
Hello.
Greed.
Yep.
Which, that is kind of shown in the second Bush's era and the 2008 Great Recession.
Yes, greed destroyed this country.
Because we've got this idea of trickle-down economics.
Stupid. Doesn't work, but yet we're hanging on to it. What idiot in this group that's making $20,000 a year sees that still as a good idea after a decade of it not working, after 2 decades of it not working?
Because this is the, sorry for the audience members that were just called idiots, but The rise of new conservatism. That idea of a bandwagon makes it so, people think that. You see people think that way today. Because I am associated with a political party, and I have to do what my political party says. The rise of new conservatism was risen during that trickle-down economics time in Reagan's presidency. He was like the idol of new conservatism.
Well, then maybe I see it because I don't buy into political parties.
Yeah, because you don't. That's the thing. You need to think for yourself.
Well, here's the other thing. I always thought that I belonged to the silent majority. I always felt that the majority of people in this country were independents that thought for themselves. But because, and this is a different topic, the system is so jacked up, they decided to not participate.
Which you should do that as
Look that up. How many people participated? How many registered voters participated in the last presidential election?
Which this is a whole nother topic.
I know, but I just want that answer because it will help confirm what I'm about ready to pontificate.
And here we go. According to...
Give me a percentage.
Let's see. Turnout of VAP percentage for the 2016 election was a little higher in 2016 and 2012, about 1% higher, 55%.
55% of the people that are eligible to vote, voted.
Yes.
Almost half. Now, those are the people that I have no proof for, but consider to be like me. I vote in every election because I think it's my civil duty.
Yes, you just
election.
Though your vote may not count personally,
whatever.
The majority does.
Your mother and I, we vote in every election, municipal, state, federal, all of them. I vote for the water.
Stuff. Yeah, the
all
water,
of them. It's
water
my
dish.
civil duty. It's the only way democracy is going to work. According to the numbers you gave me, 55% of the people that
are
registered to vote. In other words, eligible. No, not even eligible, because there's a large percentage of eligible people. They don't even register.
Yeah.
What's that number? Can we get that number? How do you? Is there a survey that gives us that number?
Let's see if I can just look it up. Eligible people to vote. I'm not really seeing.
I don't know. Yeah, how would you? That might be too hard to get that number because you'd have to somehow survey. What are the? Here's a graph. What is that? Most people never ask to register to vote. What is that?
I've never been asked to register. Unregistered, registered. I've never been asked to register. 61% of registered people.
Well, it's not something that you should.
Unregistered, 62%.
Listen.
Yeah.
People.
I don't.
Hayden,
there's no.
You're not. Did anyone have to ask? Or you're not 18 yet.
No.
Is anyone going to have to ask you to vote or to register?
No.
You are. It's like breathing. It's something that you do.
I need to look that up. I just need to go. How do I register? Because
if you're interested,
it's good to be. Not only is it good to vote, but it's good to be informed.
And if you're interested, it's something you're going to do. It's like if you want to know how to get pepperoni on your pardon me.
Nice.
Okay, we just got kicked out. Anyways, if you want to know how to get pepperoni on your pizza, you're interested in that, you figure it out.
Yeah.
So there is a percentage, Hayden.
Yeah.
We don't know what that number is, but I guarantee you, in my gut, I know that there is a percentage of people, and we could just do a dumb survey. We could just ask your classmates. Simple. Are you going to register? Are you going to register? Do you know how to register even?
Yeah.
Do you have an interest in registering?
Well, they do that.
We can go around the neighborhood and ask, did you vote? Did you vote? You're going to find a percentage, and it's going to be a large percentage, upwards of 30, probably higher. I'm being conservative, that
are not registered.
That are not registered, that have the ability to vote. So when you think about 55%, 45% of people registered to vote didn't even participate. Then there's another large group that's not participating that aren't registered.
And they're not even registered.
What do you get? Where you want to know? Your paper was on the shrinking of the middle class. Brother, there are so many.
And the only thing
contributing
you can do
factors
is do like what we're doing right now. Podcast. You can go on the news if you're a news person.
The news is BS. And
But
the news has fallen apart.
You can do because how do you even get to those people? How do you get to those people and say, hey, you should register to vote?
I did a paper on voting 100 years ago. I was 20-something. And it was, let's get, you've got to vote. Yeah. You've got to vote. It's the only way that this is going to work. And sometime in the Nixon era, there was a wave. It was a force that came across the land of basically Republicans saying, I'm not going to vote because my vote doesn't count. And the media harped on that, and it became a thing. Now it's like, why bother voting if your vote's not going to count? Well, it does count, people. You have been tricked into believing a lie. If you vote, it's counted. End of story. If you breathe in oxygen, you're going to live. Period. End of story.
There is corruption, but the basics, if you vote, it'll be counted.
There's corruption in the parties.
Yes.
The parties are corrupt.
Yes.
The Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party are full of corruption and tyranny, for that matter. Look what they did this time around to Bernie Sanders. Another topic, I realize. We got off topic. We're talking about the middle class.
Bush era,
yes.
2008, which I have this number pulled up. If you look on your screen, look at the percentage that voted in 2008.
Right.
52.2%. That is a great swell because of Obama's election, and he did a great job getting young people. He was very persuasive to young people and minorities. Hey, you need to vote.
So, are you saying or suggesting that more of these independent voters turned out to vote because there was a black man running for president with great ideas?
With sensible. Well, it might not be sensible to some people, but sensible ideas.
I almost think that people that are against Obama are racist. And cannot accept. They can't accept the idea that a black person.
He's not even black. He's half black.
Whatever, that this guy could do a good job.
Yeah. But anyway, 2008, Great Recession. Obama goes into this Great Recession as president, and that Great Recession was caused from almost the same things the Great Depression was. It was false credit. The housing industry, the banks had just, hey, you don't have money, we'll give you this, I forgot the name of the plan. It was some plan Bush put into place that basically said, if you don't have the money, you can credit this and pay it over time, like what we have today, mortgages. Only it was like an extended period of time because they didn't have the money, and they wouldn't have the money for years. And all this credit built up there was a huge bubble of housing sales. Well, that bubble finally burst as banks realized, we just credited a bunch of people that don't have the money. Because that was this plan, I forgot, it was like AOP something. It was, that's not the term, I forgot the name of that.
Are you talking about subprime lending?
No.
Okay.
Let's see.
Because a lot of what happened with the banks falling apart was the mortgage industry.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. There was this policy that said if you didn't have the money, you could still buy a house.
Right.
And that's credited. This was back in 2002. Well, by the time 2008 rolled around, there had been some years, and the banks came looking towards those people that they originally did this program with, and we're like, hey, we're going to start charging you. This has been our contract, right? We want this money. And the people are like, we still don't have that money. Well, then the banks go look at how many people they did this program to. Millions of people. Well, millions of people don't have the money for them. So there's this another false credit. The bubble burst. The housing market crashed.
False credit because they built those packages of people that didn't have mortgages and sold those.
Yes.
They sold those. Well, they were mortgage packages. Here's 10 people. I got 10 mortgages right here. They would stick one or two really good payers in there, and then the rest would be like, borderline payers, or then another chunk would be, and then there'd be some that were getting ready to default for sure. And they would offer it to people as investment packages, and they'd say, do you want to invest in these, mortgages? Yeah. They're worth $100,000, just a number, not literal. And, a guy would look at it and go, oh, okay, and he'd buy that. And those were, that's false credit. That's the false credit that I understand, because
that's another program that was put in place, which connects to the program I was talking about. I wish I knew that I just researched this. I knew that number. I knew that stance. It was something that started with an A, because we just did this in history class. We're wrapping up history. It's, the 21st century. We're here. And that program, along with what you were just talking about, caused that bubble to burst. So what banks did was they created a credit freeze. Money's not going out. We're not doing loans, right? So this credit freeze made it so these small businesses, small businesses that were using loans consistently to pay their workers to make their products, and then giving that money that they'd make from their products off of that month back to the bank to pay for their loan, and then taking another loan out to, do the same thing over and over and over again. It was just a working system. It's how the economy works. When that credit freeze happened, the small businesses could not take that money out, so they could not pay for their workers, they could not pay for their products. In turn, when their products were being sold, they had less products for sale, so prices increased. Then the people that were getting laid off couldn't buy those products as the economy crashed, because they're out of work, so they stopped consuming as much. People stopped being lenient with what they bought, which in turn hurt the businesses even more, and as the banks continued this credit freeze. Well, what Bush did, which I like this plan, I agree with this plan, was his treasurer and him had a conversation and said, we should give these banks money, right? We should give these banks millions of dollars so they can stop the credit freeze. We can stop this economic downfall in its tracks, and we can reboot the economy and just have a little, dip and go on with our lives. The businesses would be opened up, people would go back to work, consumers would continue consuming, and the next president, which would be Obama, can deal with this plan, right? This bad plan.
I gotta tell you, that was stupid then, and it's stupid now. Those banks should have failed. Those banks should have failed. Oh, yes, the economy should have crashed, and then people that did the right thing might be able to teach those that didn't do the right thing that this is how you survive. I'm sorry you don't have food because
another Great Depression situation.
So what?
That's where I disagree. You have to have it so people, you can't just screw the common Joe.
No one's asking to screw the common Joe. Are you saying that they didn't have the ability to make choices?
I'm saying they didn't have the ability to provide for their family.
No, because of what? Greed. Because they got as greedy as the people on top.
It's not their fault.
It's not their fault that they were greedy?
It's not. No, they weren't greedy. The people on top were greedy, and therefore, we haven't even gotten to the greedy part. When Bush said, let's give them millions of dollars, and these analysts agreed, the treasurer agreed, they did it. The greedy part is when the banks went, oh, millions of dollars, we're not going to stop the credit freeze, we're going to pay our CEOs. And the CEOs got paid, and everybody else got effed.
But let me tell you, as someone who lived through that BS, first house I went to go buy in 2000, I was 30 years old, I believe. And I could go buy a house. I had saved up some money. It's time to quit renting and go buy a house. I went in to go buy a house, or to get a mortgage. And I was thinking, just knowing how I lived and how I spent money and the money I was making and the job I had and my budgeting of my own personal finances, I could afford about a couple $100,000, $150,000. That's what I could afford.
Yeah.
I went in to get a mortgage. They said, oh, no, you can afford a $500,000 house.
That's the program I was talking about.
That is bullshit.
Yes.
I know by my own budgeting
programs were bad.
That I can't afford more than $150,000. I can't. Where's more a higher monthly payment going to come out of?
It's not.
Out of the air?
Yeah.
No. I can afford to pay this much on rent. I can approximately afford to pay this much on a mortgage. Here's my down payment. Let's move forward with life.
Well, that's what caused
everybody who goes as a renter and looks for an apartment knows how much they can afford to pay rent. They know how much they're making every week, and they know how much they can afford to pay rent. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the $200,000 guy or the $20,000 guy.
Why,
everyone knows. Let me finish.
Is that where your greed's coming from?
That's where my greed is. I don't give a crap that they told me at the bank, no, you can get a $500,000 mortgage. My head, my brain, and I'm not the smartest freaking guy in the world, all right? You're not looking at the freaking sharpest knife in a drawer. I knew that it was not right to go and get a $500,000 house. I knew I had to live within my budget. So when this $20,000 guy went to the bank and said, hey, I want to buy a house. Can I buy a house? That bank knew that that person could not buy a house. Yeah. But told them they could afford
because of that
a $500,000 house.
Something program that...
Find out what that program is, because you're talking about something that I just figured it was greed.
I had it on my notes. If I can pull up my notes, I'll look at that program. So, let's see. I think this is it. Yes, the age of globalization. TARP, I believe it was called.
TARP. What does that stand for?
Let's look it up. I believe it was TARP.
That sounds vaguely familiar.
No, TARP. TARP is in not TARP is in TARP. But TARP.
Well, if you put in TARP, it's going to pull out camping and Walmart and shelter, and maybe you should put
Troubled Asset Relief Program.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere.
This program is the program of the United States government to purchase toxic assets and equity from financial institutions to strengthen its financial sector, that passed in Congress and signed by President Bush in 2008. That's the wrong one, but that was during the banking crisis. That was during the recession. That was to help the banks.
Who was doing the purchasing? The federal government?
Yes, I believe so. That's where? Let's see. I want to see. Control F. It's not AO like I thought. It's gotta be. I wrote this down in my notes.
All right.
I'm sorry. This is.
Anyways, you're telling me that there was something that forced people to spend more money than what they have?
Not forced, but gave them the option.
And greed, that weird, strange force that exists on planet Earth.
ARM. ARM.
Oh, an ARM.
Yeah.
Yes, we know what an ARM is. An ARM is an adjustable rate mortgage.
Yes.
And the ARM is no more... I mean, I don't see how that would promote... buying something that you can't afford?
Because during that time period, they basically said, you don't have the money now, but if you do this, and then they'd offer you something like a $500,000 house when your own budgeting says you can only get $150,000.
No, ARM is just something that's supposed to save you money if the rates drop.
Yes, but
at the same time, if they go up...
During that time period... It was used to...
Oh, here's another thing I got to tell you, and I'm still not the sharpest knife in the freaking cupboard. An adjustable rate mortgage is dumb. It means you're not thinking. Yeah. Sure, if the rate goes down, you're going to save money. But rates, they don't go down as much as they go up.
No. Nope.
It goes down, doesn't stay down as much as it stays up.
Unless you have a crisis rate like right
Yes,
now.
unless you have a crisis. So,
and then it's like, I don't want to do that anyway because we're in a crisis. What if I lose my job? Then I'll be effed all the way around. You know.
I don't get it. I don't get it. I think I don't get it. I mean, I guess I do get it in a way. You would be like, oh, it's the people, everyone that threw caution to the wind. This includes the big, rich greedy bankers. It also goes back to the backs of the middle class.
Yep.
The middle class that thought that somehow that's the right thing to do and went ahead and did it.
And that, in turn, with all this banking stuff and the credit freeze continuing and then us falling into a recession, that's the last thing we have for our middle class. That shrunk it even more to the 2011 or 2010 census, 2011 results saying the middle class is 51%. Today, we're estimated to be 51, 52%. We'll know those numbers once the census is over for this year, 2020. And
I would say they've dropped another couple percentage points.
which would put us under half. That would mean half the population's poor or rich. And the rich population has expanded some, but did just start shrinking in 2008 as well.
I don't have anything against people working hard and making money and becoming quote-unquote rich. I do have a problem with the morality and the choices they make to get there. The stepping on the heads of other people to get there is not right. You need to get there through hard work and innovation. That's what I believe.
Yep. And we have to have a government that supports that.
The government right now and the polarization of the United States government is another topic for another day.
Yep. Anyway, that's what we got for you on the middle class. Just that timeline, the culture. I bet you understand the cultural significance. You're working it.
Obviously, I understand the culture.
Yes.
The fact is that
the fact is this shrinking, this disappearance of this middle and this hard work for.
No, it expands on those points we made earlier. The greed. Folks at the top 1% making more than the majority of the country and then not spending it.
Yep.
That doesn't help anybody.
And that doesn't work.
If you believe in trickle-down economics, you need to spend your freaking money. If you believe in what the philosophies are of Reagan, then or at least what he said his philosophies were out in the open public, you need to do what he said, and that is you need to take that money out of your damn bank and your own private coffers and spend it.
Or
you need to invest it in new businesses.
That's only if you want to believe in that system. I believe we should have a whole new system.
Oh, yeah, I don't believe in it. That's the problem. It doesn't work because people aren't doing that. And people are hypocritical anyway. So,
yep. Well, that's what we got for you. I'm going to try, if we can, on that Spreaker, when we post these podcasts, if I can, in the description, put some place where I can upload my paper if anyone's interested.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't. That's a private thing. So, I mean,
it's not private. It was just given to an institution where they publish them.
Well, then they can go look at that institution.
That's what I'm saying.
So,
if I can, that's what we got for you. The middle class shrinking. We need to reverse that if we can. It's in my paper. I basically say it's up to the common American worker to do that.
How? Yeah, you give me what are your ideas? How do we increase the middle classes?
You basically got to do what we did after the Great Depression. Everybody starts doing one thing, jumps on that bandwagon, and that forces the government and businesses to recognize that. We don't give in to, I'm not going to pay you as much, or you're not getting a raise, or, can you do this extra work and we'll just overtime, but we're not going to pay you overtime. You don't give into that. You can't lose your jobs over it, but there has to be some kind of great change, which I don't know how to start that great change.
I'll tell you what.
I'm unclear of.
36 million people jobless right now.
Yeah.
That's room for some walking.
When they go back, let's look at history. Let's see what happens. That was my ending point in my paper. I literally said in the conclusion, let's flip to it. My last sentences was, I said, the middle class is important to all working Americans, especially the new generations, who will be shaping the future of this ideology to come. I'm interested to see what happens next. Those are the last two sentences of my paper.
Well, I want I want people to be more than interested in seeing. I want some doing. I want some
That's-
action.
that's-
There needs to be action. We need
I'm
to.
doing-
There
we're
needs to be
doing
some
right
kind
now
of
with this
migration.
podcast.
Well, what are we doing? I mean, we're having a discussion. This is
Yes.
great. I love it. But really, it's a discussion that's designed for others to be able to listen to.
And then continue their
Action.
own discussions. Yeah,
Action.
and
I mean,
continue.
there's plenty of people. There has to be plenty of people that feel the same way. And action. It's going to. I'm not. I don't mean some sort of rebellion, but just in your ideas. I mean, action in. If simply someone offers you something that's too good to be true, it probably is. Action.
Yep. Do you want to wrap it up?
Okay, we can wrap it up. So, all right, what am I supposed to do here? Outtag, outro. So I read that line there, and then what? We're done?
We're done.
Well, okay then. Thank you for listening to this episode of Conversation Transfer.
If you
I crossed that other part out.
You did? Okay, I'm sorry.
So,
Do you want to start over? Let's do it again.
no, go ahead.
Okay. If you like this episode, you can try more on Apple Podcast or our hosting website, which we think will be Spreaker. Stay safe, keep thinking, and keep talking.